I think that's only a question I've only really been able to ask myself in the last little while is, what is the experience of me, for me, now in this moment? And that's something I'm sitting in a chair, I'm being present, and there's mindfulness in that, and there's all sorts of stuff, but I find that when I do step back and I have that time to stand away from representations of myself, that I can tune into me again.
It's rare that you hear an album that can put you in this beautiful, uplifting, reflective space, gives me very strong, warm feelings of my youth, that song. That kind of wonderful sort of loping, Roland Orzabal, Kurt Smith, Tears for Fears, like everything's gonna be okay.
That was a feeling.
There was madness in making this record. Like some really deep, heavy work went into finding your voice on this album. And that the only way you can open the curtains and make me feel like you do when I hear Damage Gets Done with the beautiful, brilliant Brandy is if you go through this. I mean, it's like no album I've heard in a long time, Hozier. Congratulations. I don't know how you've covered as much ground as you have. It's like you've been traveling the land for centuries.
Thank you very much. That's quite an introduction. Thank you. I'm not sure. I think for me, any experience of love or any experience of joy or lightness like that is sort of captured in some songs like Damage Gets Done. You can't experience it without an equal helping of grief.
And yet most albums, when you listen to them, seem to hyper-focus on one or the other.
Yeah.
In equal measure over a career or a journey. Here's my heartbreak record. Here's my recovery record. Here's my lost record. Here's the one I love that others won't love, but you'll love later. And it seems like you have somehow tackled a lot of it in one body of work I don't even know if you even realized you were.
Yeah, I knew that there was a lot of light and shade on the record, for sure. I knew that it was going to be... I mean, part of the theme, or part of the idea of touching on these themes that are all kind of universal, like playing with this idea of circles, that I knew that it was thematically going to be broad. But there's also, like you can't, to reckon with, it's like any experience of falling in love or parting ways or reflecting upon that after the fact or experiencing it in the moment. Nothing is ever perfectly good. No moment is ever, it's sort of every experience is alive with a multitude of things.
I think we get obsessed with trying to capture the perfect moment when all we really need to acknowledge is that one moment leads to the next.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the actuality of the moment itself and the reality of what you're experiencing in that moment.
This is a big circle, and this album is a big circle. I mean, I feel like this is one of life's big circles. I don't know how many big circles we go through in life. I'm sure it's a mathematical equation because I think everything ultimately, as I get older, I realize everything kind of is. But I think we go through multiple circles in our life. I think Dante's Inferno reflects a big circle.
Yeah. So this kind of poem, a few centuries old, very significant piece of literature. But what I found interesting about it, I guess, there's a part of me after, let's say, look, the last 3-4 years of global pandemic, etc. There's a part of me as a songwriter that's absolutely allergic to writing about the specific experiences of that.
It's so funny because just to quickly say, I came back to conversation when the world began to open up and almost made this unrealistic framework that we shouldn't discuss the pandemic, and then realized, how can we ignore it?
How can we ignore it? Exactly. It was, so to sort of at least acknowledge it and credit that we all had our own little journey into that. We all had the potential of great loss. Jobs disintegrated. Yeah. There was a huge amount of sea change. Huge amount of trauma. The context for how we understood our lives, the context for how we understood the simplest of social interactions changed entirely.
We're still trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
We just drive down the middle of Los Angeles and see how people are reacting to one another. Right? We're still trying to figure that out.
100%. So I suppose this poem, Inferno, that here's the story of a man who finds his way into new conditions, new circumstances, walks through this dark space, but in in a realm that he arranges into circles, describes as being arranged into circles. And so as he gets deeper and deeper into this place and then finally comes out the other side of the world and sees the sky again for the first time in a long time.
Yeah.
So I just, if not writing about the specific experiences of lockdown or pandemic, but at least acknowledging or nodding to, here was a journey that I felt, it was worth crediting in the last 3 years, and I feel all of us kind of experienced in one way or another.
Very clever writing, man. And I know it's almost like it's hard to put the word clever and writing into without making it sound overly cerebral, but I can't think of a different way to put it, because ultimately you have to figure out what it means to you personally before you can write about it. To write about it in specifics, hard for us to take it in, because all of us are dealing with the pandemic in our own way. Some people are mocking it, like, I remember that thing. Other people are still dealing with the traumatic fallout of it. So my question is, did you turn to this literature for you, or did you turn to it as a writing tool, or did one inform the other? I think I
turned to it first for me. Yeah, I had no idea that it would be as inspiring as it would be. I'd always wanted to go to this poem. Some part of me as a lyricist, I suppose, I had all these poems that I wanted to approach, all these kind of classic
never
poems.
did, out of fear, in case it basically... I always think I don't want to go to certain things because I'm worried that it's like I'm going to feel small or it's going to affect me in a negative way because it's so much like, oh my God, what am I doing with my life?
There is those works, isn't there? That's the funniest thing. There's all these masterpieces that were kind of, I can't face up to it.
I can't face them. It's very human.
Yeah, it is very human. I'm glad to hear you say that, because there's plenty of stuff that I'm just like, I can't do it.
We're all scared deep down, bro, of all that stuff.
Yeah.
So when you finally went to it, what was the feeling?
The feeling was, you know what? I was always there was always some part of me, and this is like the macabre part of me, and there's a kind of like, even since I was a child, I just wanted to hear this like long, very descriptive, very visual telling of a man walking through hell, in a very visual way, and so inventive. And then, so there's that part of me, but then also there's this, at that time, the first time I had time to do it was, let's say, March 2020, where, and it was this time where, news reports were just coming in. We're sort of making sense of numbers or death numbers, etc.
Bro, most of us were drinking wine, watching Family Feud, pretending this thing was going to last 2 weeks. Homie went straight into Dante's Inferno.
To be fair, I was like making myself like I'd been on the road for 2 years, so to have my kitchen again, I was like making long breakfasts, sitting outside, just
figuring it out.
Yeah, third cup of coffee. It's 2 p.m. I'm still nibbling on, whatever. I'm still slow mornings. I was taking in my comforts where I could, and I think all of us were, because all of us had been like, finally the hamster wheel had stopped spinning.
Well, we were in denial. I mean, we were in this very strange, as trauma and tragedy was going on all around us, many of us were trying to figure it out. And I think the default position was denial. And denial allows you to go searching for these kind of comforts, as you say, this kind of security of the unknown. Yeah. As it started to unfold, it became unfathomable.
Yeah, for sure. We had all this escapism, that we were leaning into. But there's this, so I had this time to read these poems. That there's always that part of me being, I should read these. As the college dropout, the voice in my head being like, you didn't read this. But there's this one line. There's a few lines in this poem. One, he approaches the door in hell, and there's that abandon all hope, you who enter here. And there's a few lines in it that resonated with me at this time when there was so much potential energy hanging in the air of potential loss. We were still reckoning with all of us knew somebody we could lose. All of us, But one of the lines in the earlier part of that passage, as Dante imagines it, he says, it says above the door, through me, you enter into the population of loss. And it just felt at that time that here we a great deal of the world was standing at this threshold, potentially we're reckoning with entering into that population of loss.
And I feel that statement in itself, and it permeates through the album, there's a lot of letting go and realizing you have very little control over the things that swirl around you that ultimately take control of your life and of your narrative or guide you in a different direction. That it almost gives you a choice that you don't have. It's like, through me, you will.
Yeah.
But you really have no choice, because life is about that pain at times.
Yeah, totally. And I think if you live long enough in this world, and look, it's fun to play with stories about or imaginings about hell. I don't believe that place exists. I think it's good that we free ourselves from it. But I think if you live long enough in this world, you will pass through your own realm, your own little hell realm, and you'll come out the other side, And I think all of us do that in our own ways. And
it's not very Irish of you to not acknowledge the existence of hell and the impending doom that hangs over your shoulder if you're not a good Irish.
We believed in it. Well, we were taught about it long enough. You know what I mean? We can free ourselves from it now.
So how do you establish a voice as a songwriter coming from a long history and lineage of faith and of family and of this idea of like toe some line, otherwise there is some unspeakable reality waiting for you. It's not just the Irishman, it's a part of life. It's a part of living on this planet. How do you reject that through art and become and find your own voice? Because that stuff is instilled, especially in our generation and up until very recently, I feel.
Totally. There's a few now, and I don't want to get into because I don't want to give the impression like I'm a great reader in any way, shape, or form. I'm really not.
You're a fucking college dropout.
Exactly. I'm not a bookish man, right? I'm not. I'm really not. But there's a few artists I'd point to in that because that is a real thing. It's like the pressure of place, of nation, the pressure of whatever group faith, of these identity signifiers.
An expectation of showing up.
Exactly, yeah. But there's a few artists. So Seamus Heaney is a poet. He talked a lot about that. This pressure of being part of a group, of representing something. But there's a great book, The Portrait of the Artist. Portrait of the Artist is a Young Man by James Joyce. He goes into real depth about that. And he was growing up as a young man in the beginning of the 20th century when Ireland was making sense of a new revolutionary identity, and also you had this whole movement where people were reckoning with the legacy of the church and how that had failed the people, etc. And he talks at length. He refers to Ireland as this is a nation that wants to throw nets around you as you want to fly. That these nets of religion, religious identity, national duty, etc. So there's that very private little path that you walk as an artist, which is, well, where am I in all of this? Where am I in all of this world?
When did you discover the James Joyce piece?
I was in my late teens, maybe. I was 18.
Makes a lot of sense. It obviously had a huge impression on you because, not to be too churlish or draw too direct the comparison, it would be a bit tasteless to do so, but it's not like you didn't take that baton and run with it early on in your songwriting.
No, I certainly did. It resonated hugely with me, and there's lyrical references. There's nods to. There's the last. So the way that book works, I mean, in that sort of Joyce changing style, the beginning of it is it's kind of this proxy autobiography. Stephen Dedalus is this character that he sort of puts a lot of himself into. Lives through, exactly. And in the beginning, he writes as a child, in his child memories. He sort of writes in these very simple sentences. But by the end, it changes to first person perspective, where he's in these diary entries. He's sort of stepping into his own vision. He's stepping into himself. And there's this diary entry he talks about. He's taking a boat to the continent for the first time. He's leaving Ireland. And that he refers to these young men who are around whom are also doing that. Shaking the wings. He refers to these as his kin, as his countrymen, shaking the wings of their exultant and terrible youths. But some of those lines found their way into my first album. And there's a poem from Seamus Heaney's Station Island collection where he imagines, and he pulled a lot from Dante in this, and he wrote it in terza rima as well too, in Dante's interlocking three triplets, in these interlocking triplets, where he goes to Lochderg, a retreat that I went to as a child. A lot of Catholic schools go to, where St. Patrick's Hermitage. And he imagines James Joyce coming to him as a spirit, as a shade, much like as Dante experiences. And James Joyce mocks him and tells him, like, what are you doing here? Like, get out, sound your note. When the circle is made wide, you have to swim out into the element and sound your note, Wow. And it's a very, very beautiful piece. And he reflects upon that passage. And I didn't realize how significant it had been to other artists. He writes in that poem about the date of that diary entry, like a
revelation.
Like a revelation. Yeah.
I mean, it's incredible when you think about the way that art creates its own timeline long beyond our comprehension as artists or as human beings. You put something out into the world, of course, you recognize the transfer of energy. Anybody with half a brain recognizes that we're not static beings that exist only within our flesh and bone. It's all just a manifestation of the energy required to share and grow and evolve, right?
Yeah.
That's how everything happens.
Yeah.
But I don't know too many artists. I've met a few, but not too many who would allow themselves the presence of mind or at least the self-awareness to recognize that every statement ultimately leads to another. Did you realize when you were making that first album in particular, 10 Years On From Church, which you've been very open about talking about recently because of the impact that song continues to have, did you even acknowledge yourself that presence of mind to realize that the statement you were making would ultimately have potentially the same impact that those pieces of literature had on others?
Certainly not.
Too heavy?
Yeah, I think it was too heavy. I was proud of that song, and there was some part of me deep down, if I could admit this, that felt that song needed to be written, and it needed to be written for me. And this was, I was an unsigned, unknown Irish musician. I'd never sold out a Whelan's. I'd never played a Whelan's. You know what I mean? I was doing open mic cover songs and stuff.
Yeah.
So to write that, I imagined that it might be appreciated by a small group of people.
But you had that feeling in your gut that you knew you'd captured something you'd been striving for in your life up to that point. Something magical that had to be written.
I felt proud of it. I felt that I had executed the ideas behind it as best I possibly
The craft is in place.
Yeah, I felt good about it. I will say that.
Yeah. Were you surprised in hindsight looking back and now how much everybody wants to talk about that song still? Not just because of the craft and the beauty of that song, but also what it's gone on to represent and ultimately, without even meaning to some degree predict that other songs haven't shown up alongside it to some degree. It still stands in a small group.
Yeah, I think in my field or in my song tradition, there's not a huge amount of I won't say like confrontational truth telling is maybe it's we're kind of maybe at a low ebb for that at the moment, but that's really only in my field, in my same sort of song tradition. I think in R&B and in hip hop, this is been really, but I think also Ireland was reckoning, and I this is me as an Irish citizen coming out of Ireland, we were reckoning with a great deal of our kind of our sort of social and psychic and moral fabric, where we were questioning, and my generation was questioning the legacy of a huge amount of abuses with regards to the institutional Roman Catholic Church.
Yes.
The last mother and baby homes, if you're familiar with what they were, they closed in the early 90s. These were these systems where unwed mothers were sort of essentially just were trapped in institutions where they did free labor, and their children were taken from them and were put out for adoption for wealthy Catholic American families
in the 90s.
The last ones to close were the 90s, the very last ones. So there's a lot that there felt like there was a great deal of sort of work to be done, a lot to be reckoned with,
That's a lot to take on as a songwriter. I mean, it's amazing that you were able to capture the spirit of that song and share it with the world, because I got halfway through what I say before, which is I never expect it for artists to do it, but I respect it if and when they find the voice to do it. I think it's a lot to expect artists through art to continually speak, as you say, these hard truths.
Yeah, totally. And we expect a lot of artists, and I would have to say, like for a group of like, we don't really invest in artists before they're artists. You know what I mean? We don't invest in the creation of artists.
No.
We don't as a society say, hey, art is worth investing into.
No, it's the first thing that gets cut.
It's the first thing that gets cut. And so we ask of artists a lot in fixing the world and healing the world and showing us where our pitfalls and where our weaknesses are, and where our
first to get lifted up, first to get knocked down. And at the end of the day as well, look, I mean, there's a purpose, I think, as to why the arts get continually chipped away at, is because it doesn't work in the favor of the system. Think about how the system ultimately works, not to get too kind of like the system, but this is how I see it, having spoken to many people over many, many years. Mm-hmm. Truth is ultimately very malleable. Someone can say something and it can be twisted and turned, and it can be used in order to serve a purpose it wasn't designed for. Very hard to do that through the voice of an artist. Therefore, let's just keep them where we can manage that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a bit conspiratorial, but I think there's some truth in it personally.
No, I think, this is a devastating quote. I think James Baldwin said once that love has never been a popular project, it's like,
And this guy's not a f***ing bookworm. Are you kidding me? This guy's coming in here. He's like, look, the first thing I've got to do is let everybody know that I don't read a lot. Come on, man, that's beautiful.
No, but it's, I don't think I read that in a book, to be fair.
But you retain the important things.
Yeah. My mind like a trap, sadly, just mind I don't know. But
why did you drop out?
Why did I drop out? I sensed that the skills I was learning in college at the time were useful to a point, but would not help me in doing what I actually wanted to do. It was very history-based, very theory-based. Yeah. And that was interesting, but it wasn't aligned with what I wanted.
What a great moment in your life to have the self-awareness enough to know that by leaving something behind, you create space to achieve something.
Yeah, well, thank you. I also knew that there'd just been a crash, massive financial crash. Yeah. So I figured I'd either be unemployable with a degree, or I'll be unemployable with the ability to maybe write some songs.
2008 GFC, man. I mean, we are living in that history still.
Yeah, still. Yeah.
Still. I mean, talk about everything's fine. Nothing's been fine since.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's crazy how
true.
That experience has, affected the very fabric of families and the ability to be able to provide, which ultimately affects the psychology of how children face the world, which affects decision. The knock-ons.
It is. I don't think there was any sort of accountability for a system that falters like that. We're still, I think globally, we're still finding reasons, still finding the wrong people to blame for when the most powerful and most wealthy institutions in the world shit the bed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Pardon the expression, but
no, for sure. I think that, to your point, those answers haven't come, and I think this assumption that with no answers there's no responsibility or no accountability is false. Mm-hmm. I just think it's taken a while for the answers to come.
Mm-hmm.
People still want them.
Mm-hmm.
People still want them. You know?
Yeah.
But we're still obsessed with these things that kind of distract us. These wonderful distractions that have been created for us to forget about the reality of things. You seem very good at being able to remove yourself from that. You are someone who's comes back. You take your time when you make your records. I really respect that. You it never felt to me like you were rushing into an opportunity off the back of one. That you took it for what it was, acknowledged and accepted it, but you took time to process it. Does that ring true to you?
Yeah, I think that I still have, especially after the first record, the work to do in knowing when to say no, or in knowing to not, that I could step away.
Clearly, if you're here talking to me, you should have said no to this.
No, I'm delighted to be here. I'm thrilled. But I think there is. It's this funny thing that, like, when I step away, I get to actually figure out. Okay, well, where am I in all this, or how do I process this? How do all of these? Because we all share the same inputs, we all share the same stimuluses. A lot of us. That's where there's a great deal of parallel thinking when art is made across societies or across the world. But it's how does this filter through me? And there is some reckoning, or there's some work to be done in sitting down and figuring out, okay, well, where am I in this? And there is something that happens, I will say, when you're a musician, or you have a moment or a buzzy moment, and you start seeing representations of yourself on social media. You see representations of yourself. Like, I'll see headlines, around the time of promoting an album, I'll see umpteen headlines, and it's great. There's all this wonderful exposure, and you get to speak about the work. Yeah. But then you read.
Is this what I am?
And you have to remind yourself, wait a second, that's not me. This is me.
No, it's so true. We're doing a very good job as a species of compartmentalizing our life into these really digestible elements.
Exactly.
But it's not healthy to the overall journey.
Totally. Or 100%. And you kind of feel yourself fragmenting. You feel, and
I've never thought of it that way. It's so true. I must fragment myself half a dozen to a dozen times a day, willingly, and I don't really know what that's doing to my overall, but sort of a sense of kind of self-awareness.
Yeah, and I think that's only a question I've only really been able to ask myself in the last little while. Is okay? Well. Bring it back down to what is the experience of me, for me, now in this moment. And that's something I'm sitting in a chair I'm being present, and there's mindfulness in that, and there's all sorts of stuff, but so I find that when I do step back and I have that time to stand away from representations of myself, that I can tune into to me again.
Where do you tune up? Do you tune up in isolation? Do you talk to somebody? What is the process that allows you to clear away some of that lichen and get to the real beauty of the not lichen's actually super beautiful, but you know what I mean? Get to its original shape.
I think it is. I think it's something that, for me, it was always something I'd do in isolation. I'd find great sense of peace and great senses of solace in quiet and solitude. And, I'm blessed being where I'm from in Ireland is a place I feel very much in step with. I feel very
County Wicklow?
County Wicklow, yeah.
What's it like?
When I moved out there as a kid, it was less urban sprawly, but there's been some urban sprawl now from Dublin. But around where I'm from, when you get past Greystones, you get past kind of like Ashford and stuff, Wicklow sort of opens up into the mountains and in a way that's very, very beautiful. There is a spot called Glendalough where I swear to God, there's something hums in that valley that's very, very. I found great peace there,
like a ley line, almost like a sense of energy that occurs.
If for those who believe in that, I think Ireland is very rich in ley lines. In County Wicklow, there's something really deep. There's a thrumming. there's a something powerful in Glendalough. I mean, it's a monastery. It's where St. Kevin did his hermitage, but it's been a site of burial and worship for
how long?
Thousands of years.
Well, there you go. I mean, thousands of years would suggest that this isn't, this is a thing. And why would you not want to believe in something way bigger than ourselves? That's why I never understand when people try to disprove this idea that energy exists in a tangible or intangible realm. That they're like, no. I'm like, why would you want to think this is it?
Why would you work hard against? Why would you work hard and
Don't you want to believe in magic?
Yeah. You know what? And as I get older as well, I cultivate. You cultivate or you gain a new relationship with joy and wonder that you never had as a child. You know. And
isn't it supposed to be the other way around?
I know.
Isn't it supposed to be like the whole world is wonder when you're a kid, and as you get older, you become more? But it's true. I think it's true. I think if you get it around the right way, it's true.
Yeah. I resonate with what you're saying with regards. I have this. For me, connecting to what I call, for the sake of broad understanding of the source. You know what I mean? Of connecting to a source or connecting to the infinite. There's places in Ireland I feel very, very close to. And
I love that. I think that it helps artists to some degree whose job it is to search for the deep again, that intangible, that thing that you're trying to strive to communicate through, that isn't as obvious as what sits before you. That can be a place of madness. And I think what you're describing probably allows you to give it some purpose at times, that you're part of a long thousands of years of trying to tap into something that is beyond your comprehension, right? How else do these songs exist? It blows my mind. It's what keeps drawing me back to music is it didn't exist before it was written, and how do you know it needed to be written, and what happened if you didn't write it? If that's not the definition of madness, I don't know what is. You go crazy, right?
Yeah. I think for me, that was the greatest risk of not making the work, or not taking the risk, or not dropping out of college, let's say, and saying, I'm going to try this. I have to try this.
I have to.
Is knowing that some part to look forward 20 years or 30 or 40 years and say, that picture of a man who didn't do that, who had all of this noise in his head and didn't find a way to exercise it, that's a very unhappy picture of a future. I'm reminded of a poem that we had to study in school.
Another poem, ladies and gentlemen, from the least well-read man I've ever spoken to. Please carry on.
I just have a photographic memory, but the line he said was, "The only madness is loneliness, the voice that goes unheard."
It breaks my heart, man. I think about some of my favorite artists who died alone.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like we've just lost somebody who went through a lot of pain.
Yeah.
And a lot of madness. And I haven't spoken to anybody about this because Sinead O'Connor's music and her life was as much a part of my upbringing in childhood, watching her find her voice and use it for what she believed in, and like, whoa, what is going on? Like, no one's ever done this in my lifetime.
Yeah.
But I feel compelled in this moment, given that we're having what I consider to be one of my favorite conversations, to talk to you about your perspective from an artist's point of view, knowing that that struggle, that loneliness is always knocking at your door when you're writing songs, I think, when you're in the arts.
Yeah.
Do you feel that?
I think there is a sensitivity. Yeah, there is a...
Nicely put.
Yeah, there is a sensitivity. And I think that's a sensitivity that for the most part of my like young adult life, I shut myself away from because it's too much, you know? And I think like any person, but certainly a lot of young men, they learn not to feel that loneliness, you know what I mean? But it creeps up on them, you know, and we sort of deny ourselves the reality of, of whatever it is, a loneliness or a pain or a sorrow.
It's always there.
Yeah, it's always there.
It's always there.
And to realize, there is when you're writing it, and there's some part of yourself that is so open. There is they're so open that whatever is coming forth, whether something's coming into you, something is coming out of you, your heart is very, very open. It's a very vulnerable state, and you are at your rawest at times. But just referring to Sinead, just going back to Sinead, when you hear, she has one of those voices, she's one of those voices that she carries so much. There's so much depth in her voice as an instrument. There is a rawness. There is what I just think is the evidence of an enormous sensitivity to grief and to sorrow and to suffering and to joy and to love. And I think that's how you get a person who has the courage to risk so much, to stand up, to be the first person on such a huge platform and say, guys, we have to look at this. You know, we have to bear witness to something that is causing so much, has caused and is causing and will cause so much suffering that does not need to be. And she had such searing, sharp moral clarity and moral courage, and she lived through that.
I think it was only in the times that followed that we realized that no one is really built to take that on. Actually built to be able to take that on.
100%.
And so it must be a calling
that
is beyond your own sense of self-preservation, given your sensitivity.
Yeah.
That is what true courage is it not?
Yeah, no, 100%. And going back to spirituality and the source and energy, I mean, I know from what I understand about Sinead, she was a very, very deeply, deeply spiritual person, you know. I feel, I mean, I've said this before, but I think in the sensibilities that she rattled, I don't think there would be an allowance or license for me to write and play with the ideas and take me to church had it not been for...
I was just going to outright ask you, you know, would there be a song like that or the ability to write songs like you've written on this album without her, an artist like her?
I don't believe so. I think I grew up swimming in waters that were made clearer by the work of Sinead O'Connor, you know.
Yeah, man, I mean... It's sort of this subconscious thing I have kicking around in me all the time in any conversation I have with an artist, is to try to better understand and help others who see the trade for what it is. Art meet fan enjoy art, artist get to make art, fan gets to enjoy art. Seems so simple on the outset, but we have to treasure our artists and protect them to some degree because that sensitivity is right there just below the surface, and it can go either way.
Absolutely.
We've lost too many greats, man, over time, and it's and people who just you thought had figured it out. That's like Chris Cornell really f***ed me up in a lot of ways, because I felt like he'd gotten to a point in his life where he sort of made it, like you made it out. Yeah. And it's like, nah, for whatever reason, and we'll never know and should never know the inner workings of how that happened. That's for family and close friends only to truly be able to process that through the trauma of that. But man, like, not now.
Yeah, I know.
Like, okay, when you're young and you're just trying to distract yourself with shit can go wrong real quick. You talk about that a bit on this album, this idea, I mean, on the song we were talking about before about Damage Gets Done, this idea of forgiveness, but also acknowledgement that youth is a dangerous place in a strange way.
Yeah, it certainly can be. I mean, there's a song on the record called "Who We Are," and that sense of arriving to a point and being unfulfilled. I mean, none of us. But you're right. There is. We're never.
That's hell. That's hell.
It's rough, man. Yeah. So I don't know. This phantom life is the lyric. This phantom life sharpens like an image. It sharpens like a knife.
Oh God. That's good.
But
sorry. Hold up. It's a fucking good one. That one.
But we all chase the carrot, you know what I mean? And then we all have this carrot that we're chasing. We all have this idea of, once I have this thing, I'll be happy. Once I have this, I've achieved this. Or once I can see other people tell me I'm great, or I experience other people's adulation, or
did you get a kick out of that first time around? Did you get it even just for a minute? Did you be like, oh man, this feels good. I'm sitting here in the seat and there's people shaking my hand. I already know them, but I like what they do. And
yeah, honestly, I was so unaligned with it. And I think some of it's cultural, some of it's Irish cultural, some of it is personal, like an inability to accept praise, an inability to accept kind words.
New Zealanders and Irish people have that in common as well.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
It's called tall puppy syndrome, bro. They'll find you and they'll knock you back down.
Yeah, exactly. The first one to get cut.
100.
Yeah. 100%. But yeah, no, but to arrive into a room of strangers and everybody says, "Hey, you're amazing," and your experience of yourself is very different from.
Don't you just want to say why?
Yeah, what are you talking about? Yeah, I have a clue.
Could you help me understand?
Yeah.
Because last night I was like kicking myself for 10 reasons as to why I'm pretty far from amazing right now.
Exactly.
The music on this album is so beautiful, and the people that you worked with on this to help bring this to life, it's just so tasteful and wonderful. And like you said beautifully, like the light and the shade, so wonderfully covered. The part 1 and part 2 that kick it all off is a perfect example of that. You're drawn into this very intimate, almost vicarious experience in part 1. And then it just kicks off into this kind of almost 1972, 1973, timeless, when everything was funky.
Yeah, true.
Like everything. Like it was Debussy's funkiest period.
Yeah.
No, but it's like everything sounds funky. Everything's rocking at about 100 to 110 beats per minute.
100%, yeah. You're not wrong. It's like whatever was in the electricity grid that powered the desk. You know, it's like all the gear was just, everything sounds,
like I'm telling you, go in and type 1973 country and all you will hear is like Waylon Jennings rocking out to a funky beat.
Yeah.
It's crazy shit.
Delicious.
So, I mean, thank you. Delicious. What a term.
Yeah.
So that was what you're striving for, because it sounds that way.
There was, and we're blessed with, I mean, LA is such a fantastic place to get your hands on good old gear as well too. So like these excellent preamps, these excellent but definitely, I mean, I wrote that, I remember writing those riffs in County Wicklow and trying to capture that. That's this sort of like John Hammer Group sort of feel of like, well, like put some sort of like analog synth to lay down the rhythm, and then just have some nice guitar.
You just got to be suspending imposter syndrome the whole time doing that, because you don't have the preamps or the band or any of that.
Exactly.
So you just making it like, can I pull this off?
Yeah. Can I, and how will this make sense?
I was catching up on some of the conversations you've been having a little bit around this album, and I noticed there's a bit of a preoccupation around some of the more personal songs about the love and whatnot. And I just wondered, as a songwriter, do you ever sort of, you can't question the process of what it is you're about to write about, or how you want to write about it, what's going to serve the purpose of helping you get through things. But do you ever get anxious or nervous that it's going to open the door to that kind of stuff, especially for someone who's very private? We don't live in a private time. Most people are talking about the relationships before they even write about them.
Yeah. True.
This is the opposite.
Yeah. I just try to be led by the song, and I think sometimes if something comes out in the song that is explicitly reflective of something, I try not to, where I can avoid it, let the songs be some diary entry or something that's some specific reference to my life all too closely. I think,
isn't that getting in the process though? Isn't that in a way kind of controlling a process that is by its nature searching for lack of control?
Yeah, I can't prevent it all the time, this, and there's specific references on this album for sure, and in some of these songs I will say there is what comes and what needs to come in the process. But some of these songs started out as songs that I wrote to to someone dear to me, you know, and in that way, and I think in the case of like Icarian, you know, was like an idea. It was I had as a gift for somebody, and Jen DeSilvio, the producer of that song, was like, "That's amazing. You should finish that and put it on the album." And I had some resistance to it, but I mean, but you know, so yeah, there is. I think I give a lot, like anything, like there's a great deal of myself in these songs, but I think maybe that's where I balance it out by, you know, I don't necessarily want to be in the public eye for the sake of it. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's enough of me to be known in loads of interviews that I do. And
here's my thinking on that. I think, there's a certain type of personality trait that requires a level of adoration or attention. It fills a hole to some degree. Hopefully that hole gets filled up and something greater comes along, but no shade on that.
Yeah.
We've all searched for, you know, some vacuous attention or something that just, it's a nice hit, right? But my thing is, if you're an artist and you can survive and you can play great shows in front of a lot of people who love you and you don't need to play the game, do it Justin Vernon's way, man.
Oh my God.
You know what I mean? Show up when you need it, show up when you want to, go away and recharge and figure it out.
Totally. A huge admiration for that man, for that artist, but for that method. You know,
PJ Harvey.
Yeah, totally.
Touched it for a second, didn't like the way it felt, too hot, disappeared back in.
Yeah.
You know. And ironically, the one that everyone talks about is a big sort of like the most kind of, apart from like, you know, some of the more kind of MTV related videos of the early days, people talk about Stories from the City as being this album, which was like the big kind of coming out PJ Harvey pop star moment. That album is all about retreat.
Right.
It's all about getting lost in New York. It's all about horses in my dreams.
Yeah.
It is not about attention.
Yeah.
It is about falling in love and getting the out of being PJ Harvey.
Yeah, that's such a good insight. Yeah.
You know, it's just funny to me that, you know, we make these assumptions ourselves. Well, you're not famous.
Yeah, thank God for that.
That's the good news, right? Not in the conventional sense, but you're known and respected for what you do.
Yeah, I think I'm at peace. I think I'm at peace with that. If people know me based on the work, I'm delighted. You know, based on the music. And they're like, hey, you know what? I like what you did there. I like your music is, you know, it resonates with me. I like it. I enjoy it. I have good memories with it. Wonderful. That's great. What else do I don't, you know.
What about in County Wicklow? That's probably where they just leave you alone the most.
They do in some of my local spots. Yeah, there's places when I have been gone for a while, like places in Ireland, I'm so recognizable. I'm also, I kind of stick out like a bit of a sore thumb.
Well, you're 7'6", and you know you refuse to cut your hair, and I mean,
exactly.
It's gonna be hard for you to change it up.
Exactly. But no, there is there's a returning to coming home to Ireland. You know, it's such a small population. There's kind of you feel there's a familiarity which can feel very close at times, but there's such warmth. And there's such support that I've experienced, and there's a great deal of.
Don't you want to travel though? Don't you want to live somewhere else one day? I always think it's in the artist's spirit to want to travel and experience other things, and I respect the need for nature and what comfort and home brings you. But isn't there a future where you can see yourself traveling?
Yeah, I suppose 6 of my last 10 years, if not more, was traveling. You know, so, and there's always a suitcase packed. So, and part of that decision was. To move home was kind of, I got a sense of wanting to have a close relationship with my family and with my parents in particular while I still can.
Oh, I know that. That's the sacrifice.
Yeah.
That is when all is said and done.
Yeah.
You can justify all your decisions and all the people call it selfish, self-absorbed, whatever, narcissism, but this idea of following a thread into the unknown.
Yeah.
When you get somewhere and you finally stop, the only thing that hurts is the time.
It's a sacrifice. Exactly. You're so right. I've said this. I keep saying this to friends. The hard work is nothing. You know, people talk about hard work. Oh, it's hard work. It's hard work.
You love what you do. It's fine. You just do it.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's always going to be a voice in you that it feels unnatural to do anything else. Yeah. You know what I mean? You'd be like, when it comes go time and somebody's like, jump, you know, here's the ring of fire, jump through it.
Yeah.
Nothing in your body says, I won't do it.
Yeah.
You know, you might be like, I'm tired right now. now, but like the work is done. You've no choice but to do it. It's the sacrifice. It's the relationships.
That's the one.
Yeah.
That's the one. I mean, that's the one that I'll never get back, that time. And I regret nothing because my parents are very proud of everything that me and my brother do. And they always encouraged us. But, man, like, that is the one. And again, talk about going through the door. You got to walk in that room.
Yeah.
You have to acknowledge it.
You do. You do.
Otherwise, it's kind of worthless. The work and everything you did doesn't mean as much if you don't acknowledge what it cost you.
Yeah, 100%. And I think there's I just recognize that there will be a time that is time I'll never get back. And so in the quiet moments between touring, in the quiet moments between promotion or creating, I created most of this album, a great deal of the time making it was here in LA. That I have these moments that I have with my family, with my parents, with my, I've friends at home now. I've watched them have kids, their first children. I'm now a godfather, and there is, again, you get older and you realize, okay, it's not the hit. It's not the hit of people saying, oh, you're great, or standing in a room and people applauding you or whatever. That's good. That's cool. That's grand. Okay, that's fine. It is like to be in step with yourself and be fulfilled. What is it to feel fulfilled and feel whole and feel connected and feel in place? And a huge part of that is community.
Community, yeah. I just think all those yeses you have to say, just eventually, if you're smart, just give you all the no's you need.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
You know what I mean? A couple of years it take me to church, bro, and you carved a good 10 years out of that. You know what I mean? You allowed yourself the space to make decisions that you wanted to make, and you said no at the right time. I mean, I know you want to keep saying more, but
yeah, I think
3 albums in 10 years that's the right amount to some degree.
It's been right for me. I think there's part of me that I'd love to do more now, I think, and it's about getting a balance. I think there's I've a better ability to, again, it's energy, right? It's of like just recharging, filling my own cup as I go, so that by the end of a tour, I'm not completely burnt out, And
well, you would say that you're about to start it. You're at the start of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Come see me in a year.
Come back to see me in a year.
Hair will be over your head.
Emaciated, yeah.
Look like an Aphex Twin video. I don't fucking talk about it.
Yeah.
Should have said no to this.
Very good point.
What's your relationship like with the craft when it's not leading to something? Like, how do you approach music or live with music when it's not part of your life's process? Yeah.
It's just funny. I felt great. If the work isn't coming, I feel at peace in stepping away from it and waiting until something comes. I think if I push too hard, I find it hard to make work if I'm not inspired. I find it very hard to finish a song, make a song for the sake of it, if there's not a spark of inspiration or something that's lighting me. All right,
so check this out. Can I ask you this, because I'm still searching for an answer that I can kind of relate to. Mm-hmm. What is it? Can you describe to some degree or with any sense of detail how you know that it needs to happen now?
That the song needs to be, or the making.
Yeah, that you can be out walking in the middle of nature, and what is that spark, that feeling? What does it feel like? Is it a subconscious? Does your skin change? Does your stomach churn? Do the words come out? Like, what is it?
Yeah, I think there is sensory parts of it. Yeah, your body lights up. There's some sense of, and again, there's a description of what this is in it, what this kind of is in Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. Joyce,
man, has a library, second largest library of books.
Same book. To be fair, same book.
To be fair.
So I've read 2 books, right?
I'm Inside Out, bro. It's incredible. It's ironic because I only know 1 album. Right. Really Inside Out. I mean, people think I like music. I'm way more of a movie person.
Yes, yeah. I was going to say, when you were saying about music, or like, how does it work in your life or outside your life? I found great freedom. There's this red carpet question that David Bowie has given, and what are you listening listening to now? And he's like, nothing really. And he's like, and he says music isn't a big part of my life.
Yeah.
You know, and I was like, oh my God, thank God.
Yeah, the expectation suddenly evaporates and you can just be David Bowie or even just Davy Jones.
Totally, totally. Or you take your nourishment of inspiration, whatever it is, from all over the place. That you're not listening to music all the time. It's not this obsessive
Well, it's because
thing.
we can't do it the way that he or you can do it. And so when we come face to face with the people who make it, and I've spent my whole life dancing about architecture. So I'm the person who knows more. And I do make music and I've made albums, so I do understand the process, and inside the studio certainly helped me. But, we're fascinated by something that, again, is magic. It all comes down to the same thing.
Yeah.
That question I asked you about the feeling is the same reason why he's dismantling that whole sort of idea of him being this music living and breathing through him. Is it's like, that may not be my magic.
Yeah. I think, he's an instrument, and there's that thing people describe where you feel like you're a channeling thing. You feel like you're an instrument of something else coming through you.
Yep.
I think Joyce describes this. There's this sense, a feeling of enchantment of the heart, and he's describing to a friend, Stephen Dedalus, is describing how do you know. He takes an object like a basket, and he says, how do we know a basket is a basket and not anything else? And he describes its form. He describes, it's this kind of philosophical question, and he says, now, if once we have conceived of this object that is purely itself, there is this thing that happens, it's enchantment of the heart, something that is not only itself in like a material sense, but itself in a psychic, conceptual sense, this collective idea of...
It's almost beyond conceptual, isn't it?
Exactly.
Because we sure do a good job of creating barriers between the enchantment of the heart and what it is that we actually experience.
Yeah. No, totally. There's all of these processes by which it gets abstracted and separated from, etc. But I think there's something that happens when a song comes into you or an idea comes into you. And this for me, it could be a couplet. It could be 2 lines. It could be a series of lines. It could be the experience of... It could be the tiniest little minute element of a memory. And there's something, I would describe it as embryonic. It feels like something is so, its potential is enormous. You don't know what the limitations of this song is yet, but you know that here is a seed that is starting to germinate, and its limbs haven't grown yet. It hasn't quite figured out what its final form is going to be, but the kernel, the core of it is so absolute and so undeniable that here some element of experience has manifested into an idea that can be captured into something new. And when I say it's embryonic, it hasn't finalized its form yet. In fact, it hasn't even begun.
But it's looking for a steward. It's looking for
pathways, things to find its way. And there's a mourning process. There's nearly and this is what I think in the past has taken me so long to write songs, because I'm sorrowful when it can't be everything. So in that moment, you're like, oh, but it could resonate with this idea, or it could also bring into it this, and how that resonates with this. There's a sadness that comes in a little bit as you watch, as the song also has to be a 4-minute piece, or a 3.5-minute piece, or something like that. And you're realizing it can't be all things. I have to put this feeling into language.
Powerful observation. That, I mean, if the people who are listening to this or watching this right now, sit with that for a second, because that is in itself, like, to your point, that is the sadness of creativity, is realizing that it's reached its limitation at that point. I think that's what drives people like Damon Albarn to just operas.
Yeah.
Africa.
Yeah.
Where else?
Yes. Yeah.
Do I not have to be hemmed in by song 2?
Yes. Yeah. No. Totally. And ultimately, the tools that we use to try and communicate this feeling, this enchantment, are so paltry and limited. Like we're talking about, like mouth sounds, words, things that are solid can limit as well too, that are not limitless. And so this feeling is not words.
So there it is. It's the realization that we as a species, through process, have been forced to limit the feeling.
I guess so.
And you only really experience it at the very embryonic stage when you realize it's like, what's possible?
And you're so in love with it. And I suppose, as you say, you mentioned Damon Albarn, if you're trying to get to, well, what are the elements of the feeling that what are the different ways I can communicate that capture its different textures, its singular elements, but because words don't often do it.
See, I think we're in a golden era for the arts, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm having conversations all the time with the best of the best, yourself included, people who are writing and communicating and expressing themselves at a high level. This idea keeps coming back over and over again, which is we're searching for feeling.
Yeah.
And I've never had that recurring statement come up so often as it has lately. And I think, once again, the arts is speaking for all of us by saying, because it's unfiltered and it speaks its true human truth, its truth, that right now what we want to capture something deeper than we've allowed ourselves to experience before.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth in that, and I think something that I try, because I know we're talking about a lot of the heady sort of conceptual stuff about art and it's making and what we feel, etc. But something I try to, especially when I kind of get a little bit ungrounded in that, is trying to bring myself back to the bare bones of, and especially it's easy to run away with expectations that a song must have a certain
That's
outcome.
what they're for.
You know? I know, yeah.
By their very nature, they have to be run away with.
They are. And I find that, expectations on, you project a lot onto a song when you want, it's like a kid that you want, it needs to be this certain sort of way. It needs to be received this way. But what I try to approach is in the work, does it feel like it's worth making in this moment? Does it feel like it needs to be made? Yes. And do I find it, and this is broad and it's up for everyone to interpret, but do I find it beautiful? And if the answer is yes, then it's like it needs to be made. And that is like, what is the element of that beauty you can look into and expand and try to pick apart, but those two questions are just kind of the absolute north for me. Is just in the bare making of something.
60 of the finest minutes I've spent in anyone's company in a long time.
Thank you. Me too.
Fucking blinking, it flew by, right? I don't even know what we fucking covered. There was a lot of shit.
I'm just waking up now.
That was a good one.
Thank you.